my dance, make it hurt.
Hello, welcome to Project Passion, the podcast made to inspire you to follow your passion and turn it into a successful business or career. My name is John Thompson, and this week I am joined by Amy from The Woman and the Wolf. Amy is a brand and lifestyle photographer based in London, and her focus is on helping other female brand owners to structure their brand and to get their image out there on social media and online platforms. Before we start this week, guys, I need to quickly just throw in a little favor, hopefully. This one isn't likes, not subscribes. This one's actually a client of mine from my marketing agency brought this to my attention. It's a story of a local girl, young girl. She's battling a brain tumor. Her name's Freya Bevins. But she was diagnosed with peanut brain tumor at 22 months old, and she was traveled out to America. She had a lot of surgery and chemotherapy and proton beam therapy as well. And since then, she's had like 5 years of scans and stuff like that there just coming up. But unfortunately, back in October, she was re-diagnosed and her family's had to travel back to America. So obviously that doesn't come cheap, the treatment she needs. So my client, 7-Star Martial Arts Academy in Neath, they're running a prize draw online. It's 100% money going to the family. There's a ton of prizes. I mean, the top prize is a signed Wales jersey from the match last week. They beat England. There's like a tattoo session, fitness sessions, gift baskets, prints from designers. It's £10 a ticket. Link will be in the description, guys. If you have £10 spare, you want to go buy a ticket, there's also a link to her family's Just Giving page. So you can go down there, you can check out the full story, and there's more information down below. But that's it for this. On with the podcast now, on to brighter things. How's it going, Amy? How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. I've been enjoying the sunshine and a bit of work. And yeah, just keeping myself ticking over in lockdown.
Awesome. So I know I kind of described you at the start there, give a little couple of brief words, but do you want to take it away and describe yourself for people, and to sort of in your own words?
Yeah, so I am a brand photographer for female-led small businesses. I do work with guys as well. I do have male clients who enjoy working with me. So it's not exclusive. And I should also point out that I work with anyone who identifies as a woman as well. It's not just exclusive to female bodies. It's to anyone who identifies as a woman. I think it's really important to mention that. I basically, the foundation of it is that I help them to create imagery for them to market their businesses and to get their message out there. And I work with all kinds of businesses, from business coaches to breweries. It's really wide ranging and very enjoyable. But the purpose and the main value behind it is that to give women confidence about showing up, and to feel good about having their photo taken, and to feel confident about being visible, because I want to see more female leaders. I especially want to see more women starting businesses. I also want to set an example to younger women, that it's something that they can do as well. And yeah, just to kind of remove the kind of stigmas around women being visible that have kind of historically been there forever. So yeah, it's brand photography for businesses, but a little bit more as well.
That's awesome. And was that the reason you got into photography, in the first place, or was there something else that took your interest in and you kind of developed this as a passion for it?
So my history in photography actually begins with landscape photography. When I was doing ski seasons in my early 20s. And then I moved into weddings 11 years ago. And then I started experimenting with more portraiture, as well as kind of really getting involved in the kind of the women in business movement. And it was quite a natural progression. And The Woman and the Wolf was officially launched in November 2017.
And that was what I was going to ask you. What is The Woman and the Wolf? Because obviously that's your brand name, that's what you work under. Does that have a representation? Is there a meaning behind that for you?
Yes, absolutely. The name means a lot to me. It comes from a number of places. First of all, I really love wolves. I love the pack hierarchies in the wild, that actually, the whole alpha male kind of myth just doesn't really exist. Often the leader of packs are female wolves, or at least partnerships. and that good leaders in wolf packs are recognized as people with knowledge, or wolves as knowledge, and who have compassion. They care about the whole pack. They won't leave elderly wolves behind. They'll also be very good providers, leaders. Aggression is also really not seen in wolf packs either, and often aggressive wolves are removed. So there's a lot of common ground between female leadership and the kind of pack hierarchy as well. And there's also a really amazing book called The Women Who Run with the Wolves. And it's a breakdown of all these kind of fables and myths throughout different cultures and history around women, and how women have been, celebrated, vilified, and it's a really beautiful book about what it means to be a woman. And so, yeah, it seemed quite natural to kind of put the two together and bring that in. And it just seemed like the right name. It wasn't as simple a process as that, I think. It took a little while, but it was kind of, I would say to people, I know lots of people struggle to come up with names for their businesses, but I think it's, if you can come up with things that you're passionate about, or things that interest you, or things that maybe tie into the values of what you want to do, and kind of start to play around with those words, then something will come out of it. So
don't take my advice for brand names. I copped out and went with JT Media Marketing, which is just my name. So I'm not one to take advice from when it comes to brand names. But I think when we're recording this, yesterday was obviously International Women's Day. Do you think that a lot more female brands are getting noticed now coming up, especially in the modern day with the digital age? Do you think that there's more of a bias towards men online, or is it getting the case now where women are dominating and are getting into positions of power online?
I'd say that it's still a struggle for women out there. The biggest thing being that we often have our looks tied in to our value. So I've actually started to really look at my language. So I'm not using the words beautiful or pretty or anything that describes someone external factors, especially a woman's, because I think that then places her value entirely on what she looks like, and removes from her actual achievements. So I would say that men definitely have their own struggles within the kind of entrepreneur and small business world. But I think for women, it's the kind of same old story. And also International Women's Day, I absolutely love it. I always celebrate it. But, it's not about celebrating, and we have to be very careful with this, that it's not actually meant to be a day of a celebration. It's actually meant to be a day of awareness. And there should come a stage where we don't need an International Women's Day, because there is equality. And actually one of the things I did yesterday, because obviously the theme for this year was choose to challenge. And this year I've chosen to challenge modesty, because that's a very patriarchal concept that's placed on women, that we should be modest and we shouldn't big ourselves up. And, this is one of the reasons women aren't visible, because they're afraid to kind of speak up and shout about what they do, or they don't know their value, which means they're undercharging. So I did a post where I kind of asked my audience to celebrate themselves in the comments, because they shouldn't need to wait for any external validation to kind of feel their value. They should feel that from within themselves.
Something you just said there that I hadn't even thought about, but do you think is there a correlation between how much a small business owner or a small brand owner charges for their service or product in relation to how they view themselves? Just with what the line you said about the beauty thing. So, for example, a service-based business, do you think that they would actually lower their pricing based off of how they think they are looking compared to their service?
Not necessarily how they're looking, but how they view themselves, like what they deem their self-worth to be. And I think for women in particular, a lot of that is tied up into how they look. So I know from my clients, a lot of the reason they won't be visible is because they either think they're too fat, they're too thin, they're too old, they've got too many spots. It's all these things that hold them back from showing up, because they're frightened of how the world will perceive them, because this is what the world tells women that they're worth, that you're only worth what your appearance is. And so, you know, it's very insidious. It's not like necessarily an obvious thing, but I think, yeah, absolutely. I definitely have gone through a process of where I didn't value myself properly enough, especially as a creative business, because I think you're very tied in personally to your work and what you create and who you are. And so much of your identity goes into it that it becomes very easy to wind up charging too little because your own personal value is low.
Yeah, I think that's something as well that I personally wouldn't understand fully or grasp fully, because it's obviously something that men, not for the most part, probably don't have to deal with. I know obviously there's going to be people in different situations, but do you think that then there is a way to sort of fix this sort of mindset? Like, is there sort of resources or videos, or is there ways that females and women can actually empower themselves and get more confident in their own sort of appearance and in their business as opposed to themselves?
Yes, I think it starts with a lot of internal work. I have been in therapy for 2 years, and I have done a huge amount of work, and I've worked with women who are at the beginning of their kind of journeys with this. And it's a long process. It's really not something that happens overnight. So it's not a case of watching like a YouTube video and all of a sudden you're fixed. It's I know it would be so good. It's for me, it's undoing 30 years of conditioning. So, things I would recommend. I mean, there's obviously Brené Brown's podcast where she interviews Sonia Renee Taylor, who started the movement "The Body Is Not an Apology," and she has a book of the same title as well. "The Body Is Not an Apology," and it's about radical self-love. And I'm not talking about thinking like you look amazing and you're like the prettiest person in the room. I'm talking about building up that sense of security in yourself, that you genuinely do accept and love yourself fully enough that you're going to protect yourself, you're going to look after yourself, you're going to value yourself, you're going to stand up for yourself. And I think just starting just the simple act actually yesterday of watching my audience, of watching women find it so hard to celebrate themselves and to list their achievements. So I think, even just the practice of on a Friday, sit down and write down everything that you've achieved for that week, and, appreciate the good things that you've done. So yeah, I think it's a process, but it can definitely start with a little bit of self-celebration and kind of going from there.
So obviously a lot of what you do then, obviously in the photography, you do lifestyle and you do brand. What is the difference in both of them? Obviously, I know most people will understand brand is more business and lifestyle is more sort of pictures of people, fashion, things like that. But what is the actual sort of discerning difference between those two niches of photography?
So I actually think they're pretty much the same. Like I think it's probably more of a difference between personal brand and brand, like as a business. I always refer to it as brand photography because I think that as a term kind of covers the whole thing. So like when I'm working with my clients, we'll obviously do a range of portraits. We'll do a range of like clothes changes. We'll work with some different locations, but we do those lifestyle. I always refer to them as like lifestyle business photos, which is them working at their laptop in their space, flat lays, kind of all these things, images that represent the lifestyle of the brand, so they can kind of take to social media and tell their story. And I don't think that's kind of that far removed from the kind of personal brand of influencers, for example, who need those lifestyle images to kind of you hear about these shoot. I don't do these, but I know photographers who do, where they'll do 6 months worth of content for an influencer in like a day. They'll be doing like Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day, like it's a big kind of shoot to get those lifestyle type images. So yeah, I think as a business and as a brand, you do need the lifestyle images because that's what you want to promote to your audience. That's what you want to show as a personal brand. But then equally, you have the portrait side of it as well, having strong portraiture. I think, I don't work with corporate companies, so I never refer to myself as commercial either. I don't work on kind of big businesses. I do work specifically with small businesses, and their primary need is content for Instagram, content for their blogs, content for their websites, YouTube image, cover images for videos, and yeah, exactly, and Facebook cover images and profile pictures, and the content to support their messaging as well. Of course, you can never deliver everything that a small business could possibly ever need in one shoot, so it's often long-term relationships as well, particularly for seasonal content. But yeah, I think ultimately brand photography is content creation, which is the same as lifestyle. It's just a different style of photography as opposed to a different genre of photography. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So obviously you run these shoots yourself. I know from looking at your website you do sort of hourly for returning customers, you do half day, full day. If we were looking at a full day shoot with you, what would that look like for someone if they were coming to work with you for a full day of brand shooting?
So it would depend on the needs of their business. So, I mean, I'll give an example of one of my clients who I worked with last year, who was a graphic designer. So we plan the shoot, obviously. So once they're booked in, we book in their planning session, which is either done over Zoom or on the phone. I usually get them to do a Pinterest board before that call, and just to email it over to me, just so, not because I want to copy the board, but just so I have some visual representation of what their expectations are. And that's kind of the foundation for the plan, and then from there we'll start to kind of build the shoot. If they require flat lays or product photography, that's usually the first thing I do on the shoot, because it gives me an opportunity to talk to them and for them to get used to having me in their space and being around me. If they're having hair and makeup as well, not all of my clients do have hair and makeup, a lot do choose to do their own, but if they are having hair and makeup, I'll be there for that as well. And that's usually when I'll do the flat lays, because it's just a nice time to be social, and then people can get comfortable. Because the other thing you have to remember with working with small businesses is these people, some of my clients haven't been in front of a professional camera before, so it's a big deal. They're quite vulnerable. And yeah, then I usually then do anything that they require in terms of those lifestyle business photos. So in the case of the graphic designer that I was working with, she had an absolutely beautiful office upstairs, and we kind of worked in that space. I actually photographed the space without her in it as well, and then we did some kind of working portraits, lifestyle photos. We showed her on like a Zoom call with a client, kind of thinking about all the different aspects of the business and what she might want to talk about with her audience, because I think that's the most important thing. It's not, what I remind my clients is that this isn't actually about them. This is about their audience and their potential clients and what they need to see and hear from them. So that kind of storytelling of the business. So for example, an image of, say, a client, my client with their client on Zoom, is a way that they can then have that image, but that can then lead on to the content about what the early stages of working with them might be like. How do they plan out their brand, and how do they, communicate with their clients? It's the imagery ultimately supports the content and the message. It's about getting people to stop. So yeah, we did those kind of lifestyle photos. We also did some clothes changes, because I'm also very conscious that when people wear too much of the same clothes, it then starts to feel like they are sharing the same image over and over and over again, which, you don't want. It's going to become quite boring. So for a full day, I usually recommend about 5 different clothes changes. And then, yeah, we kind of did, because she was a graphic designer, we also did some live mood boarding. So kind of her cutting stuff out of magazines, like places she'd find for like inspiration. She was also a painter as well. So we took some photos of her paintings. That kind of just gives her some content to maybe show more of her personal side to her audience. And then after that, we went to her local pub, because she wanted some kind of photos out with her with a cocktail, so she can kind of, those kind of like, yay, it's Friday type posts. And this is all kind of her thinking about her content, me guiding her on her content, and then looking at how we can kind of build the shoot around that. And then at the end, the kind of last part of the shoot is where I focus on the kind of real portraiture, because by that point they've gotten so comfortable with me around that they don't need those props anymore. They don't need to have their laptop there or the drink in front of them or something to hold. They've really started to come into the shoot themselves. But we did she also wanted to show some photos with her and her dog and her husband. We did some really beautiful portraits in a local park, which I love. In fact, I'm sharing her blog post tomorrow. And yeah, we just got some, she wanted to create a GIF as well of her opening a bottle of champagne. So we kind of did that as well. So it's just, it's so bespoke to each business. I worked with her, but then, I worked with some wedding planners at Christmas who had a full day, who, had a whole different brief for what it was that they required from their content. So it's always good fun as well. I like people to have a positive experience and to feel like they enjoyed having their photo taken.
So, I've done photo shoots and stuff like that before, because I'm a massive fan of actually building brands around content and putting out relevant content, as well as, like you say, lifestyle content. But as a marketer, one of the things that pains me the most is to see other marketers that don't. And we're fantastic at putting out content for our clients. We're fantastic at organizing their photo shoots and organizing their content strategies. But you will very rarely find a digital marketer or someone in the digital space like this that actually invests in their own content in that way. We're great at putting out posts on here's top 5 tips and stuff like that and quick videos, but I don't think enough people are actually going and getting these brand photographs taken to sort of, as you say, liven up their feed, to put more colors in there, to change it up a little bit from the norm of just here's 5 tips on this, here's 10 reasons you should do this, and blah blah blah. But do you think it's increased recently, or do you think is there maybe a trend coming where people are going to want more of these photographs for their brands?
Absolutely. I think it's great. I think I'm seeing since, I was one of the early adopters to this style of photography. Like back in early 2017, it was a very big thing in the kind of American entrepreneurial world to kind of have a personal brand shoot, to pay to invest in professional content. I think over here you kind of had commercial photography and you kind of had headshot photography, but there wasn't any of this kind of, and you had the influencer world as well. So you kind of had photographers that were working with influencers to build their personal brands, but I don't think the kind of average small business owner really felt that was something that was accessible to them at that point. So there was kind of me and a couple of other photographers within the London area that kind of started to offer this as a sideline to our wedding photography. And yeah, since then I've seen a lot more photographers come into it, which I think is great, because it's also the beautiful part about brand photography is that there's so much work, there's an abundance of work, because there's tons of small businesses and they need a continued supply of images. And I think more and more small business owners are realizing that this is a worthwhile investment, and it's actually an investment that they're entitled to. And this kind of brings me back to the modesty issues with women feeling like that they're going to be called vain, or people are going to think, who do they think they are? And the whole idea of spending money on a photo shoot for just yourself is quite an uncomfortable concept. And it's not that feeling doesn't just apply to women, it also applies to men as well. And actually I would say that there's a massive gap in the personal brand photography market for men. I think, I do work with men who have small businesses, but I don't know anyone who's kind of specifically owning that side of the market. And I do think there's potentially a space where men are maybe feeling left out on that as well, because it is, or within, maybe I'm in an echo chamber. I hope I'm not in an echo chamber. I try not to be, but my world and what I see is very much women kind of owning that space, which is great. I think that's really important. But yeah, I think it's definitely becoming more and more of an important must-have for small business. And I think it is a must-have. There's nothing worse than going on someone's website, going to their About Me page, and it's an iPhone selfie. Like, that makes me think that makes me feel like that person isn't invested in themselves or their business. And I myself, I'm guilty of doing photo swaps with other photographers. So that's how I get a lot of my imagery of me, because I make a point of at least posting a photo of myself once a week. This week I've actually posted more of myself because obviously of International Women's Day. And that kind of applied more into the content that I wanted to talk about. But yeah, I think I've got my first proper brand photo shoot booked for April. So yeah, while I do have professional photos because I've been doing those shoot swaps, I've booked a photographer and I've booked a venue and I've got a very specific plan in place. It's only taken 3.5 years. But I think, yeah, when you have, like, I do a lot of self-portraiture as well. So I've always felt like I've had enough of my own content to promote myself. But it's now got into the stage where I'm short on things that I need. And so I need to get that content sorted. So yeah, I think it's really important. I think more and more people are saying that, which I think is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. So I actually have a brand photo shoot coming up. So I don't actually know when it is. I'll have to check my diary. But one thing I wanted to ask is, if someone, for example, wasn't coming with you and someone who's so transparent in what you give as your service, what should someone be looking for? Someone, for example, myself, digital marketer, needs brand photographs for social media. What should I be looking for in a service from a photographer?
I would say that you need to be looking at their portfolio and their communication skills. I think you as a small business, you need a range of imagery, and I'm not just talking about different locations. I'm talking about different compositions. I'm talking about photos where you're positioned to the left or the right, so you've got room to have text on, portrait, landscape, all the different kind of compositions and formats for the different platforms that you're obviously going to want to use those images on. So you want to find a photographer that is thinking about those things, because if you get all your images in landscape and you're all central, you're going to be pretty limited on what you can use that content for, and or what your website layout is going to be. So I would also say to think about, if you do have a graphic designer as well on board and a website designer, to have them and your photographer communicate with one another. But yeah, I think you want to be looking for that portfolio, and also you just want to, for me personally, when I've built the Woman in the Wolf, I've made sure that my website has kind of all the information that people need, to make sure that they know that I am an expert in this and that I do know what I'm doing and that I am going to deliver what it is that they want. So I think, when you go on someone's website, you can kind of get a really clear feel for what it is that they're doing. I think it's also really important that you feel comfortable around that person. So when you speak to them before booking, or even if you just get to know them, I know a lot of my clients get to know me through my Instagram stories. So by the time they get to the booking stage, they feel very comfortable and confident within that decision. But yeah, feeling comfortable around that person, because that person is going to be taking your photo. They're going to be helping you create the content that's going to represent you and your business, and that's hopefully going to make you more money. If you don't feel comfortable around them enough to be yourself or to represent yourself properly, then the photos aren't going to be great. Doesn't matter if they're the best photographer in the world. I would also say that, to look for compassion as well, particularly if you feel quite anxious about having your photo taken. Photographers that get very fixated on certain poses or the light or the kind of composition, they're more fixated on the technical side of things, while forgetting that they've got probably quite a nervous person in front of them, is also not going to take very good photos of you. Or photos that you're happy with. So yeah, I think it's just about finding someone that you feel comfortable around. They've got a really solid portfolio, and that you're going to get the range of imagery that you need as well. I hope those tips made sense.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing I just wanted to quickly kind of pick your brain on. Obviously, you've built up your brand, as you say, you're an expert in your niche and what you do. How did you actually build your brand, and how did you sort of claw your way up from the bottom to get to the position you're in now?
So I would say anyone who follows me or anyone who knows anything about my brand is that I'm very open. I talk about a range of different things. I made a real point right from the very beginning. And actually, when I didn't have that much content and I was building the brand, and I still do this now. I write helpful blog posts for my businesses, but I also write content that really kind of taps into the issues that business owners will kind of, face, the kind of issue over, perfection and everything being perfect before you can kind of release it out into the world. Talking about resilience, showing up authentically, creating, content, how to approach things like Instagram and confidence, and, how to be more confident. So right from very early on, I positioned myself as an expert within these kind of discussions, and I still do this to this day. And I also made a real point of making sure that I was approachable and that people knew that I really cared about what it was that I did. Like in terms of the work, my photography, because obviously I'd already been a photographer for 8 years by then, so I kind of already had my style was established, so I didn't really need to do any work there. Obviously learning to work with clients, but yeah, just really getting onto Instagram. Instagram's been a really good platform for me. The blogging really helped with my SEO. I rank page 1 for brand photographer London, or London brand photographer, switching between kind of positions 1, 2, or 3, depending on the mood that Google's in that day. I also did a lot of networking. So I come from the wedding industry. So I made a point of, when I first started, I did like a series of portfolio shoots, because obviously I wanted to build a website, start to build a brand. And I approached people for these portfolio shoots. I already knew how to establish businesses. They already were using social media. So I knew that was going to help get my name out there quite quickly. And I did those shoots for free. So I also kind of feel that free work in the early days definitely has a place, as long as you're making sure that you're getting what it is that, yeah, exactly. The free work isn't free. It's just, there's no money exchanged. There's still an exchange. Yeah, it just kind of built from there, really, from the portfolio shoots, because obviously they were recommending me on word of mouth. They were also mentioning me on social media. I was going to a lot of networking, and I'm a massive believer in networking. And I know we're in a pandemic, so like real life networking isn't an option at the moment. But you can still connect with people. You can still cheerlead people on Instagram. I make a real point of supporting other businesses. I also built a community around the Woman and the Wolf. So all of my shoots get a blog post on my website. I usually do some preview images on Instagram and talk about how brilliant they are. I make sure that if I use an image of a client, I make sure that I mention them and their business all the time, every single time I post. I also keep an eye on what my clients are doing. So if they're having launches, or they've got a new product coming out or service, I will share that to my stories. I also, every time they use one of their images, because they're tagging me, I share that to my stories as well. So it's kind of always keeping in contact and kind of just making sure that the network is nurtured and looked after. And yeah, from there, my word of mouth is strong, my SEO is strong, my social media is strong. So I think it's a case of making sure that you're everywhere as much as you can be. And this year I'm investing in PR as well. So I really want to kind of widen my audience even more.
Fantastic. And is it just you working in the business, or do you have additional photographers or anyone else necking about?
No, it's just me, although I am outsourcing the PR side of things. So I've brought on someone to do my PR, just because it's a world I don't know that much about. And well, obviously doing podcasts, which I've been doing a lot more of recently, that's PR. But to kind of really go after some of the bigger opportunities, I kind of need someone who's an expert within that field. I definitely do need to look at outsourcing some stuff, but it's really hard because so much of how I work with people is really personal, and I really love writing. So when I was thinking, oh, maybe I could outsource my blog posts, and it's like, yeah, but it wouldn't be me, it wouldn't be what I have to say. So yeah, it is a kind of balancing act, especially when I'm shooting. I think last year I did 120 photo shoots, so I worked with 120 people, and that's during a pandemic, so I was only actually able to shoot for 6 months of the year last year. So yeah, it was very, very busy, and it's very, from the 12th of April onwards, it's very, very busy, because yeah, everyone can get their hair cut.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think what we kind of talk about in the marketing sort of niche anyway is kind of like outsourcing when you feel pain, and kind of like when you're feeling pain in a certain area, that's when to outsource. Do you have an idea where that might be? Like, might it be that you just need another person to take photographs to sort of fill them into spots, or someone maybe to book in these people for photo shoots?
Yeah, I think I would never ever send anyone else to do my job. I think that's the my brand is so personal that that's what people are booking. I think maybe the editing, but my workflow is, again, it's the pain of teaching someone my edit, and the pain of the kind of the early days while they get that right, and the inevitable back and forth that would happen. Um,
Yeah, because I mean, you have a very big workflow as well, which you can see on your website how, you have your initial contact, and then you go through and you do your thing, and you put them on an online gallery. You kind of let people know how many photographs they're going to get. You explain that you'll have a little roundup call afterwards to actually explain to them how to use this gallery. So again, I assume that's a lot of SOPs that you'd have to write up then to have teaching someone so that they could then do it.
yeah, and I think it's, it's not impossible, but it's like, when would be the right time to do that? um and I think, yeah, going forward, I think it's more a case I yeah, it's difficult, because when I think about, invoicing and admin and stuff like that, like, it doesn't actually take me that long.
Yeah, admin
It's
works
just
pretty quick.
yeah, it's just when there's lots of it mixed in with the editing, with the shoots, and the planning calls and the post shoot calls, like. But I think it's more a case of, again, I think I'm very clear on what my goals are for the year. I'm very clear on what I want to earn, and what I earn is what I charge is based on what I earn and how much I want to work. So without the pandemic, it's not quite as chaotic. It's because the pandemic means that you kind of have this feast and famine where, haven't worked for 4 months, and then I've got like 3 months of solid shoots.
Yeah. Everyone's wedding's coming up all at once, and everyone just wants all this content to put out now the sunny weather's out.
Exactly. So when things go back to normal, it will be a little bit less of this kind of period of doing nothing. But, I would say to anyone at the moment, who has a job where they do have to work with people, to use this time to get kind of maybe workflows in place and systems in place. Catch up with your blogging, make sure your website is updated and your SEO is done, like all the stuff that you don't have time to do when it is all kind of flat out.
So would you have any other tips then kind of round this out for either photographers or maybe other strong females trying to build their brand up?
I think like my biggest tip for people is just to be visible, like as much as possible. Show up where you can, and if you are just starting something, set yourself easy goals to start off with, and then to build on that slowly. So like, if you're someone who struggles with creating content, for example, because it's a big thing that businesses have an issue with, if you struggle with creating content, instead of saying I'm going to post every single day to Instagram, start with I'm going to post 3 times a week. And then once you've nailed posting 3 times a week, then start to add in more, rather than kind of setting yourself like these goals that, until you've gotten used to writing content or creating content, you can fall flat on pretty quick. And then you wind up not doing anything at all. But yeah, I think just being visible as much as possible, saying yes to all opportunities. So if someone asks you to be on a podcast, say yes. If someone asks you to do an Instagram live with them, say yes. And I think, yeah, just work on building your connections and your network, and make sure that everyone knows what you do. And I think going back to my point for International Women's Day, like self-celebration all the time. No one else is gonna shout about how good you are at what you do. It's something that you have to do for yourself, and to get better at.
That's a perfect way to end it there. I think that's awesome.
Okay.
So, do you want to just let people know, obviously, your Instagram handle will have already been on the screen, but do you want to let people know where they can find you at? And I'll also put all the links in the description as well.
Yeah, so my website is www.thewomanandthewolf.com, all one word. It's either my website or my Instagram, which is at The Woman and the Wolf with an underscore between each word, because someone else had the whole word of The Woman and the Wolf. And yeah, you can just find me in those places. That's where I am most of the time. And I'm always happy to answer questions. And yeah, it'd be good to meet some new people.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you again for coming on the show. I do appreciate you taking the time to chat to me and to actually share the message. I know one thing that this show does lack is actually a sort of sense of females and representation from females. So it's something we're really working on. I think in the next like 5 weeks, 4 of them are all females. So we're trying to put like a big push on putting more strong females in, more representation for females, and just kind of sharing the love, kind of show everyone and highlight all the different niches and all the brands and all the different people that are trying to be successful and are out here working their ass off to try and get somewhere.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think lifting and as a white woman as well, I'm fully aware of my own privilege there. I think lifting marginalized voices and hearing the experiences of marginalized people is really, really important. And it's something that we should all be doing.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
That's okay. Thank you for having me.
And guys, remember as well, if you do have 2 seconds spare, you have £10 spare as well. Go down below, hit the link as well for the description for young Fred Bevins gift raffle, and check it out for me. I appreciate it. And yeah, back next week, another guest, more information and more value for you. So catch you then.
Hello guys, how you doing? It's me, Jack, mate. You've just finished watching probably one of the best videos on YouTube. So why not take a moment to consider subscribing? And if you haven't already, hit the like button and turn the notification bell on. Apparently it helps. I don't know how. It was good to know, wasn't it?